What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, Nick, Alexander Volkanovski looked brilliant last night against Islam Makhachev, and for a long time now, Team Khabib has looked pretty unstoppable. They had a style where you knew what they were going to do, and you still couldn't stop it. My question to you is, did Alex Volkanovski last night potentially lay out a blueprint for the antidote to what the Dagestani fighters are doing?
I believe he did. And here's my thing. After Khamzat Chimaev fought Gilbert Burns, everybody started calling him out. But before that, nobody was saying his name. Nobody wanted to fight him because he seemed like this unstoppable force. Very similar to Islam. Nobody really wanted to fight Islam on his way to the title. And then he gets the belt and people are like, yeah, I'd rather, fight Conor McGregor or give me something else because I know I'm just going to lose my title opportunity. I think after last night, people are going to start calling him out and they're going to go, you know what? Volkanovski showed us some holes in Islam's game. Maybe I can go steal that belt from Islam. But you have to remember, not everybody's Alexander Volkanovski. He was the pound-for-pound number one fighter in the world going into that fight, and I believe he's still the pound-for-pound number one fighter exiting the fight even though he lost. He did everything and then some when it comes to stopping Islam's attack, when it comes to taking the fight over, when it comes to executing a game plan, and he came in with a really, really good one last night. I think his team was so proud at how he was doing it, and he was able to not only go out there and make the fight his own, but he was actually able to go try some things that Islam does best against Islam, and he was having some good success. Islam's going to take you to the ground. Everybody on the UFC roster within a couple weight classes is going to get taken to the ground if they're fighting Islam Makhachev. So they understood that was going to happen, but they planned for this fight to go there, and they knew exactly what he should do when it comes to reversals, when it comes to getting to a good position to defend when that happens, and when it comes to getting back up. He did it all very, very well, and I think that while it may have been an exposing of Islam Makhachev, it was only because it was the pound-for-pound greatest fighter on the planet, and he had a great team behind him that helped him get through this entire camp. And I say all that to say, not everybody's Volkanovski, so I don't think Islam is exactly exposed, but I think if you're one of the greatest fighters the world's ever seen, you have a good chance at making somebody who seems superhuman seem human.
Definitely. I don't think it was an exposing, so to speak. Volkanovski was the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world coming in, and as you said, he probably should be the number one pound-for-pound fighter coming out. He was the one that had the bigger mountain to climb. And so don't think that just because Volkanovski can go out there and make Islam look like a normal human being, that everybody else at 155 can. Now, that being said, I do think there are some really intriguing matchups at 155, and a few different names come to mind for a few different reasons. The most obvious is Beneil Dariush. He's the number one contender. He's been the number one contender for a while now. His skill set matches up with Islam's beautifully. He's great on the ground. He's got very dynamic striking. We saw what he just did against Mateusz Gamrot. He looked fantastic. I think he's the rightful number one contender, and I think he could really solve and answer a lot of the problems that Islam brings to the table. And I see that fight now, after watching this Volkanovski fight, being a lot closer than I had it going into last night. The other would be Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan is a very good wrestler, short, stocky, strong, kind of like Volkanovski. He fought Islam very early in his career. I think he was like 22 or 23. He's now in his mid-20s now. He's entering his prime. He's also looking very good. I think that fight gets revisited at some point and could be intriguing. And then I'll throw a wild card at you. And I think there would have to be some pretty substantial improvements in the grappling before this would be competitive. But Rafael Fiziev. Rafael Fiziev on the feet can knock anybody out at 155. And we saw last night, Islam looked good on the feet against Volkanovski, but he was getting hit. And if you're getting hit a lot by somebody like Fiziev, and Fiziev is able to do the takedown defense that Volkanovski was able to implement, that could be a very intriguing matchup. Now, saying all that, if all three of those fights were to get made tomorrow, my prediction would be Islam wins. But I think each one of those brings its own interest and intrigue to the table.
I agree. Those are all great options, and I think Beneil Dariush will likely get a shot sooner than all the other fighters. But Rafael Fiziev does have that body type that, it's a little bit stockier, so Islam has to reach a little bit further to get up under them, and he loves the body lock. He's really good with those trips, but it does take, changing levels and getting inside to implement that wrestling that they do, or just get them up against the cage and then sort of smear yourself down to get to the legs and then start to kill the hips. But I think that Rafael Fiziev's striking is way crisper than Volkanovski's. I understand Volkanovski's very good at MMA striking, and he does it well, but he doesn't have quite the same pop that Fiziev does. And if Volkanovski's able to drop Islam a couple times in that fight, I think Fiziev would be able to do the same if he was able to get those same sorts of shots off. Now, you have to remember Volkanovski came in with a really smart game plan, and you never saw Volkanovski kick high. I don't think he kicked a single time over the waistline of Islam Makhachev, and that's smart because a wrestler wants a leg. They will dive down there to grab a leg, and if you start kicking, they're going to start grabbing it. That's like giving a wrestler exactly what they want. So Islam Makhachev knew that that was what he was looking for, and Volkanovski knew that if he kicked anything higher than the waist, he was going to be in some trouble, so he had to chop that front leg and just do what he could with his hands to make sure the striking was as good as possible. And that's the difference between Fiziev and Volkanovski. Fiziev throws a lot of head kicks, a lot of body kicks, and they can hurt you really bad, but they can also be caught a lot easier than a low kick. So I think that Volkanovski had the perfect game plan. I think he threw great strikes. He brought the fight to Islam, which sort of backed up Islam. And if you know about wrestling, it's very hard to wrestle somebody as you're moving backwards. You kind of need to be moving forward. But you have to play this balancing act, because if you're pushing forward on a wrestler, they're going to wait, and then they're going to make a shot. Islam did one of those very beautifully in the fight last night. He shot in perfectly as soon as Volkanovski shot in for a combination, and he was able to get the takedown. He didn't do a ton with it, but it was flawless the way he entered. So you have to be careful with that. It's really a balancing act. It's very difficult to read, but I think that Volkanovski picked the right shots the entire fight, and that's why he did so well on the feet with Islam. And I think that that might be the difference with Volkanovski and Fiziev when it comes to fighting Islam.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Makhachev matches up great against everybody at 155, and I think if they were to make any fight at 155 with Makhachev on one side of the cage, he's the favorite and he likely will win. But there is some intrigue for these matchups, and I think after last night, a lot more people are going to be more excited about some contenders at 155 and not so discouraged that Islam is probably going to be able to implement his game plan for as long as he wants until he retires or until he decides he's had enough of 155 and he's going up to 170. So I think in a lot of ways last night, 155 became super exciting again.
I couldn't agree more. And one thing, aside from the X's and O's and the punches and the kicks and the ground control and all of the submission attempts and everything that goes into fighting, I have to point out one thing that stood out to me, and that's Volkanovski's mindset. He might be the toughest fighter mentally that the UFC's ever seen. He has such belief in himself, and I think mentally you're not going to find somebody as tough as Volkanovski on the entire UFC roster, which is the top 1% of the top 1%.
Great point. Thanks for watching this video, guys. We're your hub for all things combat sports. If that's your jam, we appreciate a subscribe and a like on the video, and drop us a comment down below. We'll see you next time.
Peace.